So, what do we do in the case of emergency?
Welcome to Colonize the Ocean podcast, where we discuss oceanic colonization, exploration, and education with your hosts Adam Jewell and Brendan Traxler.
In the series I'm in, last week we discussed a little bit about the um, life support systems, whether it was oxygen, water, and how we were going to address those and how they have been addressed in the past in different underwater habitats. So this week we're going to move forward a little bit and we're going to talk about emergency protocols and what that looks like and what it has looked like in the past. With all these things, I like to try to throw ASC into the mix as far as what we're trying to do, what it looks like for us, and just put that into that whole frame set. But at the same time, I want to keep it grounded in what we know that has worked in the past. So let's take a step back here and we look at emergency protocols. The first one that pops up here is power outage. What happens when the power goes out? Now, here on land in your house right now, your apartment, wherever you may be, your office building, the power goes out. It's a bummer. The Your computer is going to die. Your TV is going to go off unless you are hooked up to something for life support systems, hospital stuff along those lines. It's just a bummer. You might have to go on a walk. You might have to read a book, use your flashlight, light a candle. Big deal. It happens. I think we've all been through outages of some sort. But when it comes to being underwater, it's a little bit different. And people instantly think, why would it suffocate or whatever? No, not right off the bat. Usually in most habitats, you've got enough oxygen already trapped in there. You're going to be good for a little while. The bigger issue comes in different situations. And it depends on how deep you are, first off, and what the design of your habitat is and stuff along those lines. But first and foremost, it's all about, in everything we do, we need to stay calm. And that comes with protocols. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But first is we have to assess the situation and figure out why it's not there. Hopefully you've got backups, we got redundancies or triplets that where you've got a third backup to that even. And so that will kick on immediately. And, with a lot of this stuff, when I went to Jules Undersea Lodge the first time, that was one of the things we looked at was the backups they had going on for everything. They explained to me this is what happens if this goes out and stuff along those lines. And I don't know if they do that for everybody, but I think because of, ASC and are interested in all that, I wanted to see all that too, for one thing. Having a backup of some sort is obviously going to be your best thing because that should take over. But at that point in time, you also want to limit what you're doing. You don't want to run everything that you could be running on a backup. It's the vitals. You want to get your air flowing again. You want to have communication up, minimal lighting so you can see where you're going and do what you need to do. At those point in times when you've got that established and you're able to communicate with topside and figure out, hey, what's going on? Maybe there's an outage up on top of land. Maybe the generator went out. If you're still getting your power and your air and everything from the top side, maybe something went out up top and they're fixing it up there and you just need to chill out and stay still. Maybe it's something a little bit more serious. But like I said earlier, it all depends on the design of the habitat and the depth of it as well. Maybe it's a situation where it's going to be a while. So, hey, let's put on our dive equipment. Let's swim to the surface in a situation like Jules or Aquarius or something along those lines that, in the past, that's the situation. Now, when you're dealing with, decompression issues because you're saturated, it becomes a different different ball game too. But for the sake of argument here in our conversation we're having, that would be the next step is making sure that you are safe and you know what's coming up next. And then at that point in time, you can figure out, hey, this is what we need to do to fix this situation and move forward. And I think power is one of the ones that the least of emergencies that may pop up underwater. It's the easiest one to address and take care of, because what comes after that is for this hierarchy of different type of emergencies you may run into is some sort of a hull breach or a leak, and what that looks like, because underwater, that's the last thing you want to have happen, because that's where you're going to immediately start to flood. And what that looks like, again, depends on the depth. if you are at, I say, joules, where they're sitting around one atmosphere, 20, 30 feet underwater, depending on where that leak comes in, they're pumping enough oxygen in the thing to hold water out. So you can triage some of these issues with pumping more oxygen in to push that flow of water out, because there's not that much pressure coming in. But the deeper you get, once you start getting like 100 feet, 200 feet, that water's shooting in so fast that you can't really fight that off. So what does that look like? Again, with technology that we have today, we have so many sensors and stuff. Oftentimes we're able to see these failures and these issues before they become a catastrophic situation, and we're able to address them beforehand. But say you don't. The first thing you're going to want to do is, obviously, hopefully you're able to get into a situation where you've got watertight, airtight sections where you can close yourself off into it until help can arrive, or you can get into a situation where you can get rescued. If not, again, depending on where you're at, and that's a problem with underwater. Let me step back a little bit. That's a problem with when we're talking about underwater habitats, is there's so many different variations and depths and designs and stuff. There's not a one size fits all type scenario on this. And that's why protocols come in so importantly on this, because if it's joules, hey, let's just put our dive equipment, dive mask on. Honestly, it's shallow enough. You could probably swim to the surface. That's not recommended by any means, but throw in your tanks, swim to the surface, you're fine. But if you're deeper, then it comes into a different situation. Do you board up and wait for a submersible to come down and get you that's got a decompression, chamber with it? Or what? Do you attempt to raise the whole entire habitat if it's small enough to the surface? Or what? And that's where the second set comes in. Then you have to address what the problem is and start fixing it. One of the things I'll tell you with ASC and why we're looking at the modular aspect of the thing is because issues like this become a situation where, hey, if this habitat is that damaged, we can unhook it, raise it to the surface, repair it, or replace it and take it back down. And that can be one of the things too, is we just float the thing to the surface, unload the people, and you go forth from there. That is one possible outcome of modular underwater habitats, and that's why we think that it is obviously the path to a a future where underwater habitats are more widely accepted, profitable, and more readily used as well. So in everything, it's addressing the situation by staying calm and following protocols, getting to a safe place, always getting yourself safe or those around you safe, and then addressing and fixing the situation. And then last but not least is any sort of medical emergency you may have. And I can speak to this, firsthand, because the first time I went to go spend the night down at Jules is I got kidney stones while I was underwater. And that was horrible. Let me just put it that way. I was writhing in pain, 30 feet underwater in an underwater habitat all by myself. But it was all good. They had, once again, because they knew what they were doing, they were able to come and get me out of the habitat and get me to the surface and get me to the hospital and get me fixed, whatever it is. And if it had been something more serious, maybe they needed a couple divers down there to get me out. But there was protocols for that in place. And, that was, shallow water. It was able to do. But if you're at greater depths, again, you get back to the same situation with a hull breach is what do you do? Do you have to have a submersible come down there and extract you? What type of medical equipment is there in an underwater habitat for what type of situations? Obviously, there's going to be a first aid kit of some sort there. But beyond that, what do you have and how do you address it? And so, again, it goes back to design and depth. And those always come into play as what you're looking for and how you're going to address the situations at hand. Safety first is always paramount. You look at the safety. I mean, obviously, when we're designing, we look at something we think is aesthetically pleasing and it's going to draw people in and be functional. But above that, all else, it has to be safe, and what that looks like. and how do you get people in and out of it, not only for use, but in case of emergency too. So those are the different aspects we have to look at when we're designing underwater habitat and addressing concerns that may come up from it, because there are a lot of people that are terrified of the ocean, of water, and aren't going to go down in these things. And for those that may be on the borderline, that are willing to take that risk and try it out, or even if they are huge fans of it, if you have a situation down there, it can completely change their outlook and tarnish the name too. I will tell you, this is something that I have not addressed to many people in my life, but after I got kidney stones and being in Jules and that horrible experience that was, not saying Jules was a horrible experience, it's just my life was a horrible experience there. It completely killed any desire for me to ever get back in the water again for a period of time. I was like, I want nothing to do with underwater habitats. I want nothing to do with the ocean. It was just like, it was such a miserable experience. It tarnished that for me. Obviously, my passion overrode that, but that's not going to be the case for everybody. So that's why safety is so paramount and so important as we're building these underwater habitats. And while we're getting people down there, that protocols that have to be hammered into everybody that works there and visits there and stays there, so that everybody is comfortable, everybody knows what's going to happen, and has signed off, watched the videos, gone through the training that, hey, if this happens, this is what you need to do, and you're going to be safe. And keeping people safe is what we're here to do, as well as providing a great experience living and working in the sea.